The Dashi stole my dream job, the sky was cruelly beautiful.
Blue, cloudless. Like it didn't care. I remember staring at the screen, the announcement glowing in perfect white letters. We're excited to welcome her to the team. Her name. My idea. My work.
Ich should have been there.
I should have been celebrating. But instead, I was sitting in an empty office, holding a mug that had gone cold an hour ago. She had called me the night before. Wish me luck, she said, voice all sugar and excitement. And I did. God help me, I did.
Because that is what friends do, right?
They root for each other. They don't copy your presentation, submit it as their own, and walk into the interview slot that was supposed to be yours. But she did. And the worst part? I found out like everyone else, through a congratulatory post. Her photo, smiling under the company banner. Captioned, "Hard work pays off." Hard work. Mine, actually. The comments poured in, "So proud of you. You deserve this." I wanted to scream, but all I could do was scroll. Scroll through lies dressed as achievement, through praise that should have been mine. You know what betrayal feels like when it's professional? It's not loud. It's quiet. It's the kind of quiet that hums in your bones. Because no one died, not really, except the part of you that believed effort was enough. And she didn't stop there. A week later, she texted me. "I hope we're okay. I didn't mean to hurt you." Okay? She took my dream, wore my work like perfume, and then had the nerve to ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness. As if stealing a future could be undone with a sentence. That was the moment I stopped believing in accidents. Some things aren't mistakes. They're choices. And her choice was to rise. Even if it meant stepping on me to do it. This is the story of how I learned the difference between ambition and betrayal. And how I survived being stolen from, while still breathing. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to want that job. It grew in me the way some cities do, slowly, insistently, until you can't remember the version of yourself that lived anywhere else. It started with a brochure I found in the student center my sophomore year.
Thick paper.
Navy cover. A single line embossed in silver, "Make what people need before they know they need it." I carried that sentence around like a talisman, folded in half in my pocket, the crease deepening every time I took it out to read again. The company seemed mythic then, a place where work was cathedral, where ideas kept the lights on, where the smartest people argued until truth appeared between them like a figure emerging from fog. I wanted to be one of those people, the ones who were paid to ask better questions. The dream was simple at first: get good, get noticed, get in. It hardened into a plan during winter break when the campus emptied out and every night sounded like a refrigerator humming in an empty house. I made a list on yellow paper. A learn the craft. A collect small wins. A build a portfolio that doesn't apologize. Become undeniable. It took years, and I wore those years the way athletes wear early mornings, with a private pride. I became the person who stayed late after group projects ended, polishing slides no one would see. I became the person who asked professors for one more revision, one more critique, one more ugly truth about why my work didn't yet land where it needed to. My calendar filled with deadlines I invented for myself, the way lonely people fill spare rooms with plants that demand watering. I met her the fall we both interned at the same cramped agency where talent went to prove it could solve problems without sleep. She arrived 2 weeks after me with a neon notebook and a laugh that turned heads. I noticed the way she took up space, unapologetically, like a song turned up just enough to make the room feel deliberate. When we were introduced, she made a joke about our names sounding like characters in a book. I didn't laugh, not because it wasn't funny, but because I already wanted to be her friend and was afraid of showing it too quickly. We learned each other in fragments. That she could drink espresso after midnight and still drift to sleep like a stone. That I collected cheap, chipped mugs from thrift stores and remembered where each one came from. That she liked the blue of pool water best, because it lied less than the ocean. That I liked the ocean precisely because it lied, because it pretended to be a single thing when it was 1,000 truths layered on top of each other. We became a two-person weather system. She brought thunder. I brought rain. Deadlines came and we soaked them, carried them, survived them. She was loud brilliance, I was quiet discipline. Together we made the kind of work undergrads pin to their walls and whisper about. It felt like partnership, like the kind of rare chemistry the industry pretends can be engineered. It felt like luck, and I wrote that word in my notebook and circled it because I knew luck has a habit of disguising itself as effort until you mistake one for the other. On Fridays, when the agency fridge held nothing but 3 sad yogurts and a Tupperware no one would claim, we walked to the cheap noodle place by the station. She told me stories about growing up on a street where every window knew every secret. I told her about a house where silence was politeness, not punishment. We laughed easily, not to impress the room but to relieve it. Sometimes, on the way back, she would link her arm through mine and tug, a child's gesture somehow made elegant by her certainty. The dream, the capital D1, lived quietly in the background of that season. A recruiter from the company spoke at our program. I sat in the second row and filled 2 pages with notes that were mostly verbs. I asked a question about failure and the room turned to look at me like I had confessed something radical. Afterward, the recruiter handed me a card and said, "Email me when you have work that feels inevitable." I printed the message later and taped it inside my closet door. Every morning, I read it before I chose my clothes, as if it could choose me back. She knew, of course. I told her the day we split a cinnamon roll and both pretended the last bite was the other's. "That job," I said, and the words felt more like a vow than a sentence. She grinned, sugar dusting her lip, and held up her hand like we were sealing a pact. "We'll get you there," she said.
Not you alone.
We. There are sentences that age badly. That one aged like milk on a sunny windowsill.
We built together.
Side projects no one asked for. Naps under conference tables that kept the shape of our shoulders. We critiqued each other with the kind of affection that makes honesty survivable. To her credit, she was good, sharp where I was careful, instinctive where I was studied. There were nights when she would toss a sentence into the room and I would catch it and shape it and throw it back as a storyboard she could then explode with color. We taught each other our tricks and called it generosity. We shared logins, shortcuts, snacks. When she forgot her charger, she borrowed mine without asking. When I forgot my doubt, she lent me hers in exactly the dose that kept me decent. The first small crack was easy to miss. We were working late on a presentation for a retail client who insisted on the word elevate, like it was a sacrament. I had written an approach, a simple 3-part framework I'd been refining in my head for months. She loved it. She said it out loud, "I love this," and then later when our creative director came by to ask how we were shaping the deck, I listened to her describe it like a thing that had sprung, fully formed from the collective. We were exploring. We were proposing. We had landed on a clean, compelling spine. It was true and not true. I could not argue with the spirit of teamwork without sounding petty. After the director left, she squeezed my shoulder. "You're a machine," she said, which was her way of saying you build things that hold. I took the compliment home with me and put it on the shelf with my chipped mugs. Application season arrived like weather the forecasters had warned us about for months and we'd ignored because denial builds better playlists. I tuned my portfolio until it sounded like a person you trust at 2 a.m. She tuned hers until it sounded like a person you want to follow into a fire. We read each other's case studies, asked mean questions to make the work stronger, rehearsed how to sound like ourselves under fluorescent lights. I shared the outline of a talk track I'd been building for years, my story about finding patterns in mess, about designing for the moment before the moment. She copied it into her notes, "So I can hold you accountable to your best self." I believed her. I wanted to. The company announced 3 open roles that felt like the inside of my head had been posted to the internet. I refreshed the listing twice and finally applied in a burst of practical panic, checking and rechecking every link like a traveler patting every pocket for a passport. When I pressed send, I sat very still, the way you sit after a prayer you were careful not to make out loud. I texted her a screenshot. She replied with 6 fire emojis and "go claim it," and then, a beat later, "send me your deck, let me be your meanest reviewer." I sent it within the hour, my cursor hovering over the zip file like a parent releasing a child into a crowd. She texted back, "This section is bulletproof. This section needs blood."
We bled on it together.
It gleamed. The interview invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, just as a delivery guy left a box of paper behind the receptionist's chair, and we all pretended to be excited about sustainable office supplies. I read the subject line 3 times and stood up too fast. The room tilted and then steadied. I forwarded the email to her with the kind of restraint that breaks into a run inside. Yorin came back within seconds. She added a string of celebratory obscenities and then, "We rehearse tonight." She booked a small conference room that smelled like dry erase markers, and we worked until the cleaning crew turned the lights off and on to remind us night existed. She made my answers cleaner. I softened her edges as if smoothing a stone I might later skip across a lake. At the end, she hugged me for the first time in months. "You ready?" she asked. I said yes and wanted to mean it. The morning of the interview, the company emailed to say they needed to adjust the schedule, something about an internal conflict. Could we push to tomorrow, same time, apologies for the inconvenience. I stared at the screen and tasted the metallic disappointment of adrenaline turning into air. I forwarded the note to her with a groan emoji. She sent back, annoying.
Silver lining, another day to sharpen the blade.
We made a plan to meet that evening and run it once more. At 4, she texted, emergency errand, can we do it late? At 7, actually dying, tomorrow morning? Promise. I told myself it wasn't a sign. I told myself stories about bad timing and good intentions. I made flashcards and paced my apartment until the floor memorized me. She called at 10.
Wish me luck, she said, breathless.
For what? I asked, uncomprehending. Long story, just think good thoughts. It didn't fully land until the next day when the company called my name from the glassed-in lobby and ushered me down a hallway lined with posters of principles that had once sounded like scripture. I sat in front of the hiring panel under a light that made everyone look slightly more heroic and slightly less real. I spoke in sentences I had practiced in rooms that weren't this one. I told the truth the best way I knew how. They were kind. They were curious. They were the exact level of intimidating that proves your dream has a spine. When it was over, I smiled in the bathroom mirror with the complicated relief of someone who has survived a performance without knowing if she was cast. 2 days later, I got the email. We appreciate your time. We were impressed by your perspective. We've chosen to move forward with another candidate. I read it once, twice, a third time to make sure the words meant what they always mean. I forwarded it to her with a broken heart emoji I felt embarrassed to earn. She wrote back immediately, "What? They're idiots."
You're brilliant. Coffee tonight?
My treat. The tenderness was a balm. I put my disappointment in my pocket and made space for her concern. The next morning, the feed filled with her face. We're thrilled to welcome her to the team. Her name. The company's logo. A photo of her standing exactly where I had stood after my interview, the lobby's geometry arranging itself into triumph around her. The caption quoted, almost word for word, the opening from my deck, the thesis we had built together from a sentence I'd been carrying since that Navy brochure. Make what people need before they know they need it. I zoomed in until the pixels broke. My heart did not race. It stilled, like an animal listening for the second snap of a trap. There's a moment when betrayal is not yet memory and not yet proof. A moment when the body registers what the mind cannot metabolize. I sat perfect and perfectly still, as if motion would smear the truth. She texted me within an hour. I hope we're okay. I didn't want to tell you until the offer was official.
It all happened so fast.
I'm so sorry if this hurts you. I typed, congratulations. Then deleted it. Typed, I'm proud of you. Deleted that too. Finally sent nothing, which felt like the only honest sentence left. What came next was a week of trying to be normal around the crater. I went to work. I answered questions. The agency buzzed with the kind of gossip that feeds on statements written in public. She wore new clothes that looked like they had been chosen by a stylist who read the job description. She took long calls in the stairwell and returned with eyes that shone like polished stone. People stopped her to say well deserved. She accepted each compliment with graciousness calibrated to the wattage of the admirer. When she reached me, she hugged me and whispered, they made a mistake. I told them that. It was a lie. Or maybe a truth too late to spend. At home, I scrolled through side-by-side screens, her LinkedIn announcement, the deck we'd worked on, a bulleted framework for my notes, a rehearsal we recorded on my phone where I tried a line and she said yes. That. I looked at timestamps. I counted the days between her neon heart reactions and her sudden distance. There was no smoking gun, only smoke. But I had learned enough about fire to recognize heat. I printed the rejection email and the announcement post and taped them inside the closet door next to the recruiter's card. The shrine of my ambition had become a crime scene. I stood there barefoot and tried to decide whether I was angry enough to strike a match or exhausted enough to sleep on the floor. The first night I didn't sleep, I kept revisiting, in my mind, the origin of the dream.
The brochure. The silver line.
The way my chest had lifted when I read it. I wanted to return that feeling to the store it came from and ask for a refund. But feeling doesn't come with receipts. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote, "A dream is not a job description. A dream is a direction." I made tea. I watched the window thaw from night to morning. I answered 3 emails I could have ignored. I showered and chose a different kind of black dress, the one that makes my shoulders look squared to the horizon. When she texted to talk coffee, her treat of course, I said yes. I needed to see her mouth form apologies so I could stop imagining a version where remorse arrived like weather. We met at the cafe with the string lights that make everyone look like they've learned something. She was light and contrite, I was quiet and precise. She said all the right phrases in the wrong order, never meant to, it just happened. "I value you, this doesn't change us." I said very little. At the end, she reached for my hand and asked the question I had been avoiding since the feed turned into her fan club.
Can you forgive me?
The word landed like a coin in a well whose bottom I no longer measured. I pulled my hand back gently, the way you rescue your fingers from a candle you've trained yourself to touch. "I don't know yet," I said. It was both truest and kindest. I watched relief fight with offense in her expression. Then I stood, and the chair's small scrape against tile felt like punctuation. Outside, the air had that tense clarity the world gets just before rain. I felt the city look past me, the way cities do when a single person's grief attempts to take up too much room. I walked without destination and found myself standing in front of the campus building where I first saw the brochure. The bulletin board had changed, new flyers for new lives, the staples rusting in the corners like bad habits. I pressed my palm to the glass out of an instinct I couldn't name and whispered, "I still want it." Not the job, not anymore, maybe not ever, but the life where what I make matters, where the work is cathedral and the light is honest and the people I build with don't treat my effort like scaffolding.
On the way home, I book ta blank notebook.
I didn't open it that night. I placed it on my desk and left it there like a promise that did not require fanfare. In the morning, I wrote one line on the first page. "Dreams live in people, not in offices."
Then, indernit.
And I am still a person. I closed the book and went to work. The day smelled like wet concrete and new paper. It smelled like beginning. Beginnings have a way of pretending they're innocent. That morning felt almost merciful, gray sky, soft drizzle, the hum of printers and keyboards sinking into something that sounded like purpose. I told myself to keep my head down, do the work, stay dignified. Dignity, after all, is just pain with better posture. But then she walked in. Same cafe-scented perfume, same smile that made rooms behave. She looked new. Not guilty, not awkward, new.
Hair brighter.
Watch more expensive. I told myself she deserved to feel proud. Success has a glow, even when it's stolen light. She waved like nothing had fractured between us.
You have it back. It's astonishing how politeness survive where trust dies.
That afternoon, our manager gathered everyone for a knowledge share. Her presentation. Her first talk at the new job, the one I'd once imagined giving. Someone connected the projector. Her deck appeared on screen.
Slide 1, designing for the moment before the moment.
My title. My voice. My cadence, even in font choice. I felt heat crawl up my throat. People around me murmured appreciation. I smiled, practiced, frozen. It's strange watching your own words perform for someone else's applause. She spoke flawlessly, confident, charming, rehearsed. She didn't even flinch when my framework appeared, polished, renamed by one adjective.
The Horizon Method. My Horizon Framework.
So close it could kiss itself. So wrong it burned. Afterward she found me near the coffee machine. "I used a bit of what we worked on," she said, cheerful, eyes bright. "You didn't mind, right?" My mouth shaped a sound that was neither yes nor no. She was already gone before the silence finished forming. That night, I opened every file I'd ever shared with her. Slides. Notes.
Late night brainstorm.
There they were, timestamps, revisions, the quiet proof of collaboration turned theft. Every idea we'd birthed together now lived under her signature. I scrolled until my eyes blurred, each click another pulse of disbelief. I wasn't naive anymore, I was violated. Still, I didn't call her. Not yet. Anger, I learned, wants witnesses.
You wanted control.
Days passed. The office moved around me like a movie playing on mute. People whispered her name with awe. Her success became folklore. She's the youngest lead they've ever hired. I heard it in hallways, on lunch breaks, in the cadence of envy disguised as admiration. Every word scraped. At home, I replayed our last rehearsal video. In it, she laughed at my stumble, corrected me gently, said, "You're the real deal." I paused the clip at her smile, wide, sure, wolfish, and realized I'd mistaken charm for warmth. The first confrontation wasn't cinematic. It happened in a parking lot, under a streetlight that hummed. She'd left work late, so had I. Our paths collided in that strange choreography fate reserves for the unfinished. She saw me, startled, then smiled like we were in on a joke the universe had overplayed. "Hey," she said.
You've been qui?
"Busy," I answered. "Good busy," she teased. "Learning the difference between sharing and surrendering," I said. Her smile faltered. "Look, if this is about the job." "It is."
Silence.
Tires hissing on wet asphalt. "I didn't steal anything," she said finally.
You earned it.
"With my work." She shook her head, that same confident tilt that once looked like grace.
You're overacting. Overacting, the favorite word of the guilty.
"You copied my framework," I said. "Even the phrasing." She laughed, light, dismissive. We brainstormed together. Ideas overlap.
You don't own a thought.
Something inside me snapped, quiet but final. "I don't need ownership," I said.
Just honesty.
She shrugged. "You're making this awkward." And that was it, the dismissal, the audacity, the casual rewrite of history. She got in her car and drove away, leaving me with the smell of exhaust and the taste of iron behind my teeth. The days that followed blurred into a study of endurance. I kept showing up, kept doing the work, because leaving felt like letting her keep something else. But everything I touched reminded me of what she'd taken. Emails I wrote sounded defensive. Projects I led felt like consolation prizes. My laughter, when it came, arrived hollow. People said, "You should be proud of her. She came from where you came from." As if shared origin was redemption. As if betrayal was mentorship gone right. I stopped explaining. I let them believe the narrative, they preferred it tidy. But at night, I wrote. Not for revenge, not even for therapy.
Just to remember the truth before it blurred.
Pages filled with fragments. Ambition without loyalty is theft in heels. Kindness isn't weakness, it's invitation. Next time, build alone. One evening, scrolling through headlines, I saw her featured in an article, "Rising Star Redefines the Industry." There she was, smiling, saying, "Success is about collaboration." I closed the tab. The rage didn't rise anymore, it just folded into fatigue. I realized betrayal ages into exhaustion faster than forgiveness ever could. Weeks later, a message arrived.
Subject line, "Let's talk."
Her name. My pulse didn't even change. "I miss our friendship," she wrote. "I never wanted it to end this way. I know you're hurt."
Please believe me, it just happened.
It just happened. The anthem of every coward. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I printed the email and pinned it to my corkboard, beside the rejection letter and the company post that announced her triumph.
The Trinity of my education.
That night, I went for a walk. The air was crisp, the kind that makes streetlights hum. Each breath hurt less than the last. In shop windows, I saw my reflection, tired, yes, but clearer. I thought about the job, the dream, the girl who believed effort guaranteed fairness. She was gone, and I didn't mourn her anymore. Because the theft had already done something unexpected. It had stripped away illusion.
End illusion, once gone, never grow back.
She stole my dream job. But she also freed me from believing dreams can't be stolen. Now I build differently.
Alone, maybe.
But honestly. Tomorrow, She'll ask for forgiveness. And I'll finally decide what that word means when it belongs to me. Forgiveness didn't come tomorrow. What came instead was silence. Thick, stubborn, and heavy like fog. It followed me everywhere, through the office corridors, across the crosswalks, into my apartment where the air itself seemed to sigh. I thought anger would stay longer. But anger burns too fast. It leaves behind something colder, ash that settles in your lungs until every breath tastes like aftermath. The emails kept arriving. From her. From people congratulating her. From the company's newsletter that still found my inbox weeks later, our new lead is making waves. Each time I saw her name, it was like stepping barefoot onto glass.
Sharp, soudaine, unavoidable.
I learned to stop checking my notifications. I learned that ghosts don't haunt houses, they haunt screens. At work, I became efficient at pretending. Smiling at the right moments, contributing ideas without conviction. I answered small talk with small lies.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Just tired. So happy for her. Everyone believed me, not because I was convincing, but because belief was easier than involvement.
The first real breakdown came quietly. No screaming, no dramatic collapse.
Just me, standing in my kitchen, watching the kettle whistle and realizing I hadn't eaten all day. I poured water over tea leaves, then stared as they bloomed and darkened, hypnotized by how something could release so much color after being drowned. And then I started to cry. Not the graceful kind. The kind that begins in the throat, that ugly, trembling gasp that sounds like the body trying to eject memory. I cried for everything, the job, the years, the trust, the version of myself who had believed friendship was a safe place to dream out loud. When it was over, I was still standing. But inside, something had caved in.
Acquier démolition. Invisible from the outside, irréversible within. Days blurred.
My apartment became a museum of fatigue, half-folded laundry, cold mugs, notes scribbled at 2 a.m. that I couldn't remember writing. I stopped opening curtains. Morning light felt intrusive, like judgment. Night, at least, kept its promises, it didn't ask me to perform. I told people I was taking time for myself. What I meant was that I didn't trust myself around joy anymore. Music felt wrong. Food felt unnecessary. Sleep, when it came, was full of rewinds, the email, the announcement, her face in the photo that used to be my dream. Sometimes I scrolled through her feed like a masochist. She was thriving, of course. Panel discussions. Interviews. Quotes in glossy articles about women supporting women. Each post chipped away at something soft inside me until there was only bitterness left, dry and clean like bone. I used to think grief was about missing something. Now I knew it was about realizing what you'd lost had never been real in the first place. Weeks passed. Routine returned, wearing new clothes. Work. Home. Work again. Colleagues started asking me to lead meetings again. You've been quiet lately, they said. Quiet was safe. Quiet didn't betray. But the thing about silence is that it gets crowded after a while. Memories start pacing inside it. Regrets take up residence. One night, I found myself staring at an old folder on my computer titled Dream Job Deck. I hesitated, then opened it. There it was, slide after slide of the thing I'd built, still glowing in digital perfection, still mine in every way that didn't matter. For a moment, I hated how beautiful it looked. Then I hated myself for hating it. I closed the laptop. The sound of it clicking shut felt like the punctuation at the end of a eulogy.
The invitation came out of nowhere.
A company email, subject line, panel on career resilience, guest speakers announced. I wasn't supposed to open it. But curiosity is just another word for self-harm when you're still bleeding. She was on the list. Of course she was. There she was, smiling under the title, Overcoming Professional Setbacks. I laughed. Out loud.
The sound startled me, DRY, cracked, somewhere between humor and hysteria.
Setbacks. That was what she called it. A setback. Like she'd tripped, not pushed someone else off a ledge. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat in the dark, my phone lighting up my face like a confession booth, scrolling through her words. She had a quote pinned. Success isn't about taking opportunities, it's about creating them. I whispered to the empty room. And stealing them. Eventually, even pain becomes background noise. It hums quietly until you forget what silence used to sound like. I started walking at night, long, aimless walks through streets that didn't ask questions. Sometimes I'd see her building across the river, glass glowing like a promise she never kept. One night I stopped on the bridge and stared at my reflection in the dark water. It rippled, fractured, disappeared, then returned, distorted but intact. And I realized something.
Iwas n'était en gris ni mort.
Not really.
Iwas antide.
It's a strange kind of peace, the peace of being too tired to hate. That's when I knew the collapse was almost over. A few days later, she texted again. Her message glowed at the top of the screen, almost gentle. I know you hate me.
I deser vite.
But can we please talk? I miss you. I stared at the words for a long time, the way one stares at a locked door knowing the key is in their pocket but unsure if opening it will burn the house down again. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I didn't trust the sound of my own forgiveness yet. Instead, I opened a blank document and began to write, not to her, but to myself.
Lines, fragments, remindés. You can't rebuild where the foundation was descended.
You are not what they took. What they stole was work. What remains is worth. The words didn't heal me, but they kept me breathing. By midnight, I realized I'd written 10 pages. And for the first time in months, my hands weren't shaking. The next morning, I opened the curtains. Light filled the room, indifferent and soft. It didn't ask if I was ready. It just arrived. Outside, the city was loud again. Car horns, footsteps, laughter spilling from cafés.
Life, stillen boderd. I brouet coffee.
Ate toast.
Normal things.
Unremarkable things that felt like victory. Halfway through breakfast, I got an email from a small agency, one I'd applied to months ago and forgotten. They'd seen my portfolio. They wanted to talk. It wasn't the company. It wasn't the dream. But maybe that was the point. Dreams change shape when they break. Sometimes they come back quieter, but truer. That night, I walked past her building again. Lights on, people moving inside like shadows of ambition. Somewhere in there, she was probably talking about teamwork again. I smiled.
Not bitterly.
Just, finally free. Because collapse, I'd learned, isn't the end of the structure. It's the sound it makes when it realizes it can't hold what doesn't belong inside it anymore. And as I stood there, under a sky too vast to be cruel, I whispered, not to her, not to the past, but to myself.
You restir.
She stole my dream job. But the breakdown taught me something no job ever could. How to live without needing to be chosen. Tomorrow, I'll walk into a new interview. Not to prove anything. Not to compete.
Just to begin again.
And this time, no one can steal that. The day I decided to meet her wasn't about closure. It wasn't even about anger anymore. It was about reclaiming my voice, the one I'd handed over piece by piece while trying to be kind. The message came in at 8:13 a.m. Her name lit up on my screen like a scar reopening.
Can we talk?
I need to say this in person. For a moment, I almost deleted it. But something in me, that quiet, steadier self I'd started to grow, whispered yes. But this time on your terms. So I replied. 3 p.m. Cafe across from the bookstore.
No smiley.
No apology. No softness. Just coordinates. It was one of those afternoons when the city pretends to be calm. Muted clouds, steady light, the kind of peace that only exists right before something breaks. I arrived early. Ordered green tea. Sat by the window, the same table where months ago I had once believed people could be good if you gave them enough honesty. The cafe hummed around me, spoons clinking, espresso hissing, conversation low and harmless. I placed a thin envelope on the table, printed emails, timestamps, and the overlapping slides that proved what she'd done.
Note to accuse.
Just to keep myself from doubting my own memory. When the door opened, I didn't look up right away. I knew her walk, confident, precise, the rhythm of someone who'd never had to earn her second chances. She stopped at my table, perfume first, voice second.
Hey, she said softly. You look good.
I am. I gestured at the chair.
Sit.
For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The silence was polite, the kind that hides 1,000 unfinished sentences. Then she started. I didn't think you'd actually agree to meet. You asked, I said. And I wanted to see if you'd have the courage to show up. Her mouth tightened, but she smiled like someone performing regret. I owe you an apology, she said.
For everything.
For how it happened. Do you even know how it happened? I asked. She blinked, thrown off. I never meant to hurt you. Things just moved fast. The company liked my work, I finished for her. Yes, I know. I recognized it in your launch video. Color rose in her face, then vanished. You think I stole it? She said quietly. I don't think, I said. I know.
She exhaled, long, slow, the kind of breath you take before you start lying again.
I built that presentation myself, she said. You helped, sure, but we always shared ideas. That's what collaboration is. Collaboration, I repeated, tasting the word, is when both people agree to build something together. What you did was take the house we built and replace the name on the door.
Her eyes flashed. God, you make everything sound poetic.
It wasn't that deep. It was my career, I said. It was my dream. Dreams overlap, she muttered. I leaned forward, voice low. No. Theft overlaps. Something in her face hardened, guilt giving way to pride. You're not the only one who worked for that job, she said. You had your shot. I did. And you made sure it missed. The waitress passed by, refilling our cups, oblivious to the quiet war at our table. When she left, the silence settled again, thicker this time, heavy with the sound of everything we weren't saying. Finally, I pushed the envelope toward her. Keep it, I said.
Evidence means nothing to me now.
I already survived the verdict. She stared at it, but didn't touch it. What do you want from me? She asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and defense. Nothing.
He smiled, calm, almost kind.
I used to want an apology. Now I just want peace.
And you can't give me that. Her expression craqued, confusion, then fear.
Do you hate me? She asked. I thought about it. I don't, I said.
Atreides, just another way of keeping you close.
She looked down, fingers trembling on the table.
He wish he could take it back.
You can't, I said.
And he wouldn't let you.
Because if you hadn't done it, I'd still think kindness was enough to protect me. Her eyes filled, not with remorse, but with the recognition that this was the last time she'd have my attention. Can you forgive me? She whispered. I already did, I said. But not for you. She frowned. Then for who? For me. So I could stop rehearsing this moment in my head. I stood. The chair scraped softly against the tile, a sound like punctuation. Goodbye, I said. Wait, she said quickly, standing too. Don't you miss what we had? I looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, I saw her clearly, the ambition, the insecurity, the hunger.
The same things you said to love in myself.
No, I said. What we had died the moment you called betrayal ambition. Then I turned and walked away. Outside, the light had changed, cooler, sharper, almost metallic. Rain had stopped. The street glistened like it had been forgiven. As I walked, the air felt lighter. Each step a little less weighted with the ghost of what I'd lost. I didn't look back. That story had already finished itself. Across the street, in the bookstore window, a sign caught my eye.
UZ, not broken.
I smiled. For the first time in months, it felt true. That night, I came home and lit a candle. Opened my notebook and wrote one last line beneath all the others. I don't need to be understood by the ones who betrayed me. I only need to understand the version of me who stayed.
The flame flickered, steady and small, like something newly alive.
And in that quiet, I realized forgiveness wasn't an ending. It was just the sound of finally letting go. The next morning, the world looked newly washed, not bright, but clean. The kind of morning that doesn't demand, doesn't announce. Just arrives. I stood by the window, coffee in hand, and watched the street below. Delivery bikes.
A man in as you talking to no one.
Life, gloriously uninterested in my personal resolutions. And I liked that. I liked that the universe had already moved on. It gave me permission to do the same. The interview I'd done earlier that week wrote back again, an offer.
Not the dream company.
Not even close. But when I read the email, I felt something small and strong in my chest, not excitement exactly, but alignment. We want someone who builds with honesty, they'd written. I smiled. That word, honesty, had become a kind of compass.
Everything else, he could learn.
I took the job. It wasn't glamorous. No rooftop office, no polished glass. Just a small studio with mismatched chairs and ideas that smelled like possibility. And for the first time in months, I wasn't performing competence. I was living it. Healing didn't arrive as a single moment. It crept in through ordinary days, through the way sunlight pooled on my desk, through the quiet satisfaction of solving small problems no one would ever thank me for. Some days, I still thought about her. Not with rage anymore, but curiosity, like studying a scar to understand where the blade entered. She messaged again, once.
A single line. Hope you're happy now.
I didn't reply. Happiness isn't a competition. And besides, she wouldn't have recognized mine. Mine didn't wear achievement like armor anymore. Mine looked like freedom, waking up without flinching, creating without fear that someone might steal the shape of my voice. One evening, the agency asked me to give a talk, Lessons from Starting Over.
Standing backstage, he cooked my reflection in the dark monitor.
Same face. New eyes. I began without notes. When you lose what you thought defined you, I said, you learn what was never negotiable. For me, it wasn't ambition. It was integrity. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need an audience. People nodded, some smiled. But the real moment wasn't for them. It was for me, hearing my voice fill a room again and realizing it didn't echo against shame anymore. Afterward, someone approached me, a younger woman with shaking hands. She said, I had a friend who did something similar to me. How did you forgive her? I thought about the cafe, the envelope, the silence that followed. Then I said, I didn't forgive her to fix her. I forgave her so I could stop orbiting her gravity. She nodded, eyes bright. I wished someone had said that to me a year ago. Sometimes I still pass the old company's building on my way to meetings. The windows are tinted now, sleek, reflective, like it's trying to hide what's inside.
He never looked too long.
But once, just once, I caught a glimpse of her leaving.
Sam strid, Sam poise.
For a second, our eyes almost met through glass. I didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't even slow down. Because healing isn't walking away, it's walking past.
He kept that notebook. The one he booked the night he first lost everything.
Its first page still reads, Dreams live in people, not in offices. Now, pages later, I've added a line beneath it. And the truest dreams are built where betrayal can't reach. The ink smudged when I wrote it, a good kind of imperfection.
Proof of humanant.
On my desk sits a small plant. The same kind she used to keep, only hers always died from overwatering.
Minus alive.
Steady. Unremarkable in the best way. Sometimes, during late nights, when the city hums and everyone else has gone home, I whisper to it. Not because plants listen, but because some truths sound better out loud. You made it. And I have. Not in the loud way success announces itself, but in the quiet way peace does, without an audience, without applause, without needing anyone to validate that it happened. She stole my dream job. She took my words, my plans, my pride. But she never took my capacity to rebuild. Because what she mistook for weakness was just my silence, waiting to turn into strength. And in the end, it wasn't revenge that saved me. It was the quiet decision to stop bleeding for someone else's victory. I'm done surviving her story. I'm finally living mine.